let's say that you see someone playing a hammer build, and you see like a bunch of smites going off in the background as well, and it looks really cool, because it does, and it reminds me of Cast on Crit from Path of Exile, and it feels so much fun to play. So like this portion of the build, just having a hammer spiral around you, is an excellent way of leveling, and like once you get some smite idols, then you can just transition into the smite version of the build. And once you get a devotion, you can transition into like the devotion smite version of the build. You could level with smite self-casting, but I would say the leveling with hammers is super good, and it's kind of what I would recommend. So let's see if we can give you a couple basic planners about how you might do this. So first things first, let's go into Sentinel, let's go Paladin. So let's take a look at your mastery first. When you're leveling up, you got 0, 0, 0 across the board. We're going to be a Paladin, but doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. We're going to put a couple points into Void Resistance, because early on, the Void damage is super high in Last Epoch, and it kills you at level 16. So we're going to grab a little bit of Void Res here, a couple points there, a couple points of Vitality, and then a bunch of points into reduced damage taken from nearby enemies. So 5 points in here, and we're going to need 3 more points. You can put these wherever you want. You can put them into some extra cooldown recovery speed for Lunge. You can put some extra Void Res, some extra Vitality, whatever you want. Maybe 20 or 21 points there, and then we're going to move on. As soon as you get your mastery, you can start speccing into other things. You can spec into Forge Guard, you can spec into Paladin, you can spec into Void Knight. You can spec all the way to the right of the mastery that you choose, but even if you don't choose Void Knight, you can still spec into the first half of the skill tree. So if you're a new player, just keep that stuff in mind, okay? The first couple things we're going to look for are maybe we want some extra Void Res. We can put 1 or 2 points over here in the Void Knight skill tree. You can get some flat damage for your throwing skills, which is here. If you want some of this is fine. Just keep in mind, if you do use these nodes, eventually, if you transition to the Smite version of the build, remember this turns off healing for your Smite, and it turns it into void damage instead of being fire or lightning. So just keep that in mind if you do choose to put any points here. So for us, we're going to be a Paladin. The main things we care about are damage early on, so we're going to get as much damage as possible so we can just like, kill things. A little bit of extra elemental resistances here. We're going to be Holy Aura as soon as we become a Paladin. We'll just put it on our bar, and it'll give us 15% elemental resistance just for being a Paladin. So these points early on, they're not too important, but if you really want some extra elemental resistance, go ahead and grab it. But we want as much of this this physical damage here as possible, because we're going to be leveling as a Fizz Hammer Throw character. Some physical damage, some extra health, some extra endurance, some extra stuff here. Maybe we want some... I guess we need a couple points to get over to the right side here, because eventually we'd like to be able to spec into crit avoidance and armor. So maybe like some extra attunement here, maybe some extra... maybe some elemental resistance. Just a couple things to help us get to the other side of the skill tree. Because eventually we'd like to spec into all this crit avoid, and what we're really looking for is let's get as many points as possible to get to Reverence of Duality. Because Reverence of Duality is like generic damage increase, generic health increase, and it's a great place to be. So we'd like to get here as soon as possible. All right, if we're looking for more damage while leveling, Void Knight, we can grab this, and this helps to scale like generic hammer throw damage. But I think by the point that you get to like this area of your skill tree, you'll probably have a couple Smite idols, and you can start playing like a spell version of the build. So first things first, let's say if you are playing Hammer Throw, how can you level up a Hammer Throw character? Well, you're gonna open up your loot filter, and you're gonna look for any kind of ring, maybe a silver ring, so you can move nice and fast. And you're gonna look for something that says throwing damage and reduced mana cost. Even just a tier 1 of this gives you a nice little flat damage boost and gives you -3 to the mana cost, which feels super easy for leveling. I would 10 out of 10 recommend 2 of these rings. So we're going to say that you put those on your loot filter, or maybe you are playing a character in a league that already exists, and you can just like toss on 2 of these rings and craft them for yourself fairly painlessly. Hammers are so good for leveling that you really don't need any of the fancy uniques or anything like that. What I would look out for is a one-handed mace. It happens to have an implicit modifier of 20 to 30% increased physical damage. Hammers are a throwing skill. Throwing skills do not use your base damage. So this one has plus 20 melee physical damage, and this one has plus 53 melee physical damage. Those numbers do not apply to your hammers, which means the only reason your weapon would matter is if it has a different kind of implicit. Does it have something else that might apply to your build? So this 20 to 30% increased physical damage is the best you can do at level 8, and you could honestly use this weapon to like level 70. It's not a big deal. It gives you everything that you need. So a little bit of physical damage there, And you'll see if I go Control F throw, there's nothing. So we're gonna grab Control F physical, and we'll just put like a tiny bit of physical damage on it. Just having a weapon like this at like level 8, level 10, level 15, level 70 is gonna be enough for you. That's how good hammers are for leveling, and they feel excellent. So that's what you're looking for. For leveling, any kind of glove or any kind of boot or any kind of chest armor, anything that has resistance on it is high priority for you because it makes leveling easy. So the first glove that really matters that has relevant text on it is this Outcast glove at level 25. So we're going to click on this because before you get to this, it really doesn't matter. So let's grab this. We'll look for anything that has the word throwing on it. We can get a little bit of percent throwing damage and maybe a little bit of percent throwing attack speed. This will be like an S tier leveling item. It'll carry us for a very long time. So it's so easy. Let's get an amulet as well. A Jade amulet is a level 4 thing. It also has up to 15% throwing attack speed. And again, if we just look for the word throwing, anything that looks like this, even though it says, percent increase fire damage taken, flat damage is flat damage, and it's going to feel good no matter what. If you're uncomfortable with that, you could also just go for generic percent increase physical damage, and it's another way of like scaling your damage up. So let's talk about the skills themselves. Hammer throw is a skill you get like level 3 or level 4. So the first couple of things you'll do is care about your mana cost. You will want these spirals as soon as possible because the spirals, instead of just throwing one hammer out in front of you, so the first thing you do is make it so the hammers don't return to you, but they have a 35% chance for double damage. So instead of just throwing out a hammer, you're going to throw out a hammer and have it do a spiral. So what's nice is you can run past monsters, have a spiral going, and then keep running. If you're familiar with Path of Exile, this node makes it feel like Spectral Helix. You don't need the orbit right now. The orbit's nice later on. The orbit's nice when you have a lot of movement speed. You can zip through echoes later on, like level 50 or so. Orbit also feels good once you have enough minus mana cost, because you'll note that this one has +4 mana cost and this one also has +4 mana cost. After that, we're looking to have 1 or maybe 2 rings because we want to keep the mana cost nice and manageable. But after we have 1 or 2 rings, we can click on this first node and then get a few minus mana cost, minus mana cost, minus mana cost, minus mana cost. And after you feel like you have enough minus mana cost, we can jack up the mana cost again. So my method of leveling this is like, let's keep the mana cost nice and low because I like having fun while I'm playing video games. So keep it nice and low, keep it like something that you don't really have to worry about. And then once you have it like, maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 3 mana cost, then you can just jack up the mana cost again by putting another point into this catapult node right here, for example. We can spec into these nodes. This is chance to deal double damage. We have 35% chance here, and then a few more double damage nodes down here, bringing us up to like 100% chance to deal double damage, which is quite nice. There's some hammer throwing speed down here, and that's really all you need. Once you feel like you want the orbit, you can click on the orbit. And this transforms it from Spectral Helix from Path of Exile into Blade Vortex from Path of Exile, which is way more fun in my opinion. We're playing a Paladin, and Holy Aura is one of the reasons we play Paladin. We get access to these nodes on the bottom right here, and this is a bunch of throwing attack speed and a bunch of generic attack speed, which also applies to throwing attack speed, and chance to gain haste on hit. So I think these nodes here, I would highly recommend to you. They feel excellent. If you need some more elemental resistance, sure, go ahead and spec them in. Let's say that your second skill, we might spec into Lunge, and then maybe Holy Aura is our third skill. This looks like a nice little place to be. Lunge, it doesn't do too much for us, but it does give us a kill threshold, which is right down here. Lunge instantly kills enemies that are below a kill threshold, and then you might even spec into this, right? And just having these smites cast, maybe you're not specking into smite right now, but just having more stuff going off as you're clearing a map feels pretty good. So what I tend to do while I'm leveling up early is just have these nodes here, which is you are invulnerable while lunging, and I'll probably end up specking into all 3 nodes down here for the kill threshold as well. Ultimately, what you're going to want to do is put a few more points into the Void Knight skill tree so that you get access to Volatile Reversal. And then we'll also want to spec into Volatile Reversal here, and then maybe some Sigils of Hope down here. Sigils of Hope, if you've ever looked at a sigil tree, you know what these are going to look like. Something along these lines, and then you can kind of fill in the rest. This is just +1 sigil, some extra damage, some extra armor, and then sigils on kill. And then Volatile Reversal because it gives us movement speed, attack speed, cast speed, damage. It's a thing that hits, and it also says enemies take % increased damage, and that can stack. So something along these lines as you spec into it is going to be perfect for you. And the rest of it, you can just kind of tease out whatever else you want. If you want more movement speed, more attack speed, more cooldown recovery down here, that's up to you. But some kind of skeleton skill tree that looks like this will serve you well. Eventually, you're going to want to have the idols for this as well. The idols are 2x2 idols. They look like this. And they say, let's go Control F throw. Chance to cast Smite on hit with throwing attacks. If you have maybe 2 or 3 of these that are well rolled, like 2 or 3 of them that are like 8s and 9%, or maybe 3 or 4 of them if they're not particularly well rolled, the better the roll, the more consistent your damage is going to feel, and you're going to be really happy about that. As soon as you have 2 or 3 of these in your build, you can start transitioning into like scaling spell damage. So we're going to need to spec Smite at some point. So we'll take Lunge off of here. We'll despecialize this, and then we'll spec into Smite here. So this is the character that I'm currently playing in the background. It's why this build is so much fun, because it kind of feels like a cast on crit build. So the important parts that I would tell you about are, well, we're not self-casting, so these nodes don't mean anything right here. And also, we'd like to get over here to transform the damage into lightning and give us some extra clear speed. Note that this says +5 mana cost, but because we're triggering Smite, we don't pay the mana cost at all. So we don't care about the +5 mana on this node. So we'll have this bit here, we'll spec one node here, and then all of our damage is going to come from this node, which is Sacrifice. It's 50% more damage per point, but it costs us life. So my recommendation for you would be to spec all 5 points into Atonement to make it reduced down to 0 health cost, because I don't like paying life for my stuff. So we'll put 5 points into Atonement, all 5 points into Sacrifice, and then we get to spec points into Conviction here. So just 4, maybe 5, maybe 6, or I guess maybe 5 points into this node, depending on whether you have a +1 Smite relic on your character, which you might have access to. So 4 points in here gives us +8 base crit. And because we get so much base crit from Conviction here, it really doesn't matter that we're not using a catalyst. If we wanted to juice up our damage as much as possible and really lean into having bonkers DPS, we could use an unread scroll and have +6 spell crit, but we really don't need that. We don't need +6 spell crit. And in my opinion, if your skill already has plus base crit in it, and you can get away with, using a shield, you you probably should use a shield. Once you start scaling spell damage, you want things like Attunement, percent increased lightning damage, percent throwing speed, so you can throw stuff to trigger the smites faster, and you no longer want things like percent damage with hammer throw, because percent damage with hammer throw and percent increased physical damage and throwing damage, those no longer apply. So once you swap over to being a smite build, you gotta retool your gear a little bit and start focusing more on the spell component and less on the throwing damage component.